One minute we were walking onto the Family Feud stage as champions, ready for our comeback. The next, Steve Harvey held a court order declaring our entire fortune and our family's future illegitimate. The smell of a television studio is something you never forget. It's a strange mix of new carpet, stale coffee, and the electric hum of 1,000 hot lights. For me, that smell used to be the scent of victory. It was the smell of my family's new life. 1 year ago, we were the Millers, the 5-time reigning champions of Family Feud. We were America's sweethearts. My dad, David, with his perfect teeth and quick wit. My mom, Sarah, the warm, reassuring heart of the team. My older sister, Chloe, the sharp, competitive genius. And me, Leo, the goofy 17-year-old, just happy to be along for the ride. We didn't just win, we dominated. We cleared the board round after round, and Dad was a god in the fast money hot seat. We took home a grand total of $184,000. Life changed overnight. We went from a cramped 2-bedroom rental to a beautiful house in a gated community. Dad quit his soul-crushing sales job to pursue his passions, which mostly meant playing golf. Mom got the gourmet kitchen she'd always dreamed of. Chloe's college tuition was paid in full, and I got a slightly used but still very impressive Mustang for my birthday. We were local celebrities. People would stop us in the grocery store, wanting to shake Dad's hand. "We rooted for you every night," they'd say. Our church put a picture of us in the weekly bulletin. We were the feel-good story of the year, the humble, hard-working family who finally got their break. And at the center of it all was my dad, the charming patriarch who had led us to the promised land. He was my hero. So, when the call came from the producers a month ago, it felt like a dream sequel. The Millers! We're doing a Tournament of Champions special. We want our greatest family back. Dad was ecstatic. He strutted around the house for a week, practicing survey questions with Mom. "Top 5 things you find in a glove compartment," he'd boom over dinner. Chloe was a little more reserved, already focused on her pre-law studies, but even she couldn't hide a smile. For me, it was a chance to relive the single greatest moment of my life. It was a victory lap. The day of the taping, the old excitement was back. We were flown to Los Angeles, put up in a fancy hotel, and chauffeured to the studio. Backstage felt like a homecoming. We saw familiar faces among the crew who high-fived us. The other champion family was nice enough, a boisterous group from Louisiana, but we could feel their intimidation. We were the legends. As we stood in the wings waiting for our introduction, I felt Dad's hand clamp down on my shoulder. "Ready to do it again, champ?" he whispered, his eyes gleaming under the stage lights. "You bet, Dad," I grinned back. I had no reason to doubt him. I had no reason to think this was anything other than what it seemed. The music swelled, the announcer's voice boomed our name, and we walked out onto the stage to a thunderous ovation. The lights were blinding, the energy electric. And there he was, Steve Harvey, standing in the center of it all, clapping along with the audience, that famous mustache crinkling into a wide smile. He shook all our hands, giving my dad a familiar bro hug. "The Millers are back in the house," he declared, and the crowd went wild again. He did his opening monologue, joking with the audience, making fun of his own suit. Everything was exactly as we remembered. The comfortable banter, the easy laughs. We were settling in, ready for the first face-off. But then something shifted. The playful music faded out, and a more serious, ambient tone filled the studio. Steve's smile tightened. He wasn't looking at his usual cue cards. Instead, a producer in a headset scurried onto the stage and handed him a folded, official-looking document with a blue cover. The audience murmured, confused. My mom shot a nervous glance at my dad. Steve cleared his throat, the sound echoing in the suddenly silent studio. "Folks," he began, his voice losing all its usual comedic warmth, Before we get to the game, we have a little bit of housekeeping to attend to. A legal matter, actually." He unfolded the document. The cameras, which were usually sweeping across the audience, all swiveled and zoomed in, tight on our faces. I could see myself on the monitor, my confident grin replaced by a knot of confusion. "I hold in my hand," Steve said, his voice now cold and formal, "a court order issued this morning by the Superior Court of California, County of Los Angeles." He looked up, not at the crowd, but directly at my father. The friendly host was gone, replaced by a grim messenger. My heart started hammering against my ribs. A court order? Here? On live television? It made no sense. This had to be a joke, some kind of weird new segment for the show. But the look on Steve Harvey's face was anything but funny. He looked down at the paper again, his finger tracing a line of text. "It concerns the eligibility and winnings of our 5-time champions, the Miller family." My mom's hand flew to her mouth. Chloe's eyes were wide with panic. I looked at my dad. He was frozen, his face pale, the charismatic smile completely gone. Steve took a deep breath, and as he spoke, every word landed like a punch to the gut. "It states here that the application submitted by the Miller family contained a fraudulent declaration, specifically concerning the employment history of the family patriarch, David Miller." He paused, letting the weight of the accusation hang in the air before delivering the final devastating blow. "It seems, David, you failed to mention you were fired from your previous job at Fremantle, the company that produces this very show." The air in the studio was sucked into a vacuum. The roaring applause, the upbeat music, the friendly banter, it all vanished, replaced by a dense, humming silence. 1,000 pairs of eyes were pinned on us, not with adoration anymore, but with a morbid, hungry curiosity. My dad's face was a statue carved from chalk. The blood had drained from it so completely I thought he might faint right there on the stage. He opened his mouth, but only a dry, clicking sound came out. "Now, hold on, Steve," he finally managed to stammer, his voice thin and reedy, a pathetic imitation of his usual confident boom. That's a mistake. There's been a misunderstanding. I worked in the mailroom, a temp job, years ago. It wasn't—" Steve Harvey held up a hand, and the gesture had the finality of a judge's gavel. He wasn't smiling anymore. He wasn't the funny TV host. He was an executioner. "The court order is very specific, David. It includes a sworn affidavit from your direct supervisor at the time. It states you were a full-time employee for 14 months, terminated for cause. The rules of eligibility for contestants on Family Feud are ironclad. No employee of Fremantle, past or present, or their immediate family, is eligible to compete. You signed a document right here on this stage a year ago, swearing that you met those qualifications." Every word hammered another nail into our family's coffin. I risked a glance at my mom. Her face was a canvas of disbelief and horror. Her eyes, wide and glistening with unshed tears, were locked on my dad. It wasn't just confusion in her gaze, it was a dawning, sickening betrayal. She was seeing the man she'd been married to for 25 years disappear, replaced by a stranger. Chloe had her arms wrapped around herself, her knuckles white. As a pre-law student, she understood the legal jargon perfectly. Fraud, perjury. She was watching her own future, her pristine academic record, get splattered with the mud of our father's lie. "This is a violation of contract," Steve continued, his voice resonating with grim authority as he read from the document. "And as such, all winnings are deemed illegitimate. The court hereby orders the Miller family to return the full $184,000 to the production company." A collective gasp rippled through the audience. It was a physical sound, a wave of shock that washed over us. $184,000. It wasn't a number anymore. It was our house. It was my mom's kitchen. It was Chloe's tuition. It was my Mustang parked in the driveway back home. We didn't have $184,000. We had lived on $184,000. We had a mortgage, a car payment, credit card bills for new furniture, and flat-screen TVs. The money was gone. "Furthermore," Steve said, and I didn't think it could get any worse, "any and all major assets purchased with the winnings are to be surrendered." He looked up from the paper, his eyes finding mine for a brief, pitying moment before moving on. "A court-appointed receiver will be in contact to oversee the liquidation process." The floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet. This wasn't just losing, this was annihilation. We were being stripped bare in front of millions of people. My dad finally crumpled. The mask of defiance shattered, and he just sagged, his shoulders slumping. "No," he whispered, a desperate plea to no one. "Please." Two men in dark suits, who I hadn't even noticed standing in the shadows, stepped forward. They didn't touch us, but their presence was a clear signal. Our time was up. The game was over. The producer with the headset spoke into his mic, and the house lights began to come up, breaking the theatrical spell. We were herded off the stage, not through the cheering curtain we'd used before, but out a side exit, down a cold concrete hallway. The other family, the one we were supposed to play against, watched us go with expressions of stunned pity. The last thing I heard before the heavy door swung shut behind us was Steve Harvey's voice, now back in host mode, telling the audience, "We'll be right back after this commercial break." We were led into a small windowless room with beige walls and a couple of cheap chairs. "The green room," the sign said. It felt more like an interrogation cell. The moment the door clicked shut, leaving the four of us alone, my mother's composure finally broke. She spun on my father, her face streaked with mascara, her voice a raw, trembling whisper. "David? What did he mean? Terminated for cause? You told me you left that job because the commute was too long. You told me!" My dad wouldn't look at her. He sank into one of the chairs, burying his face in his hands. His whole body was shaking. I can explain, Sarah. It was a stupid mistake. I didn't think they'd ever find out." "Find out?" Chloe's voice was ice. She stepped toward him, her hands clenched into fists. "You committed fraud on national television. You lied on a legal document. Do you have any idea what this means? They could press criminal charges, Dad. All of this, the house, the money, it was all built on a lie?" "I did it for us!" he yelled, his head snapping up. His eyes were wild, desperate. "I did it so you could have a better life. So I could get out of that dead-end job. I wanted to give you everything." "You gave us a nightmare!" my mother shrieked, her voice cracking. "You humiliated us! You humiliated your children!" She was sobbing now, deep, gut-wrenching sobs. I just stood there, frozen against the wall, watching the man I had worshipped my entire life crumble. He wasn't a hero. He wasn't a champion. He was just a liar who had been caught. My mom took a step back from him, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand, a new cold clarity hardening her gaze. She looked at him, not as a wife, but as an interrogator who had just found the loose thread. "This wasn't just about a job, was it, David?" she said, her voice dangerously quiet. "Lying on the application. That's not something you do because of a bad commute. Tell me the truth. Right now. Tell me why you were really fired from that job." My father flinched as if Mom had physically struck him. The question hung in the sterile air of the green room, heavy and suffocating. He looked from my mother's hardened face to Chloe's furious glare. Then his eyes skittered past me, unable to meet my gaze. He was a cornered animal. All the bravado, all the charm he projected on stage had evaporated, leaving behind a weak, terrified man I barely recognized. He shook his head, running his hands through his perfectly coiffed hair, messing it up for the first time I could remember. "Sarah, it doesn't matter now," he mumbled, staring at the scuffed linoleum floor. "It was a long time ago. It's done." "No!" Mom's voice was like a whip crack. "It is not done." "We are about to lose our home. Our daughter's education is in jeopardy. Our son just had his life's proudest moment turned into a public spectacle of our family's disgrace. It matters, David. It is the only thing that matters right now." "Why were you fired?" Her voice dropped to a near whisper, laden with a chilling premonition. "What did you do?" Dad squeezed his eyes shut. A single, pathetic tear traced a path through his 5 o'clock shadow. When he finally spoke, his voice was so low we had to lean in to hear it. "Embezzlement," he confessed. The word was a poisoned dart, and it hit us all at once. "It wasn't a lot," he added quickly, as if that would somehow soften the blow. "Just petty cash. A few $100s here and there. I was skimming from the mailroom's postage fund. They caught me. They were going to press charges, but I begged. I had a young family. They agreed to let it go if I resigned immediately and signed a non-disclosure agreement. The silence that followed was profound. It was a silence filled with the sound of our family shattering. Embezzlement. My father, David Miller, the charismatic champion, the church-going family man, was a thief. He hadn't just been fired, he'd committed a crime. The lie he told on the Family Feud application wasn't just about hiding a past job, it was about hiding his true character. He had built our dream on a foundation of deceit, not just for the show, but for us, his family, for years. Chloe let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "Oh, my God," she whispered, backing away from him as if he were contagious. "The non-disclosure agreement. That's why you weren't worried. You thought they were legally barred from ever talking about it. You thought you were safe." Her lawyer-in-training mind was piecing it together with horrifying speed. "But a court order subpoenas those records. It supersedes an NDA. You didn't just lie, Dad. You were stupid." "I had to," he insisted, his voice rising in desperation. "We were drowning in debt back then. It was just a little bit to keep us afloat. And when the chance for the show came up, I saw a way out. A real way out for all of us. I knew it was a risk, but I took it for you." "Don't you dare," my mother hissed, her eyes blazing with a fury I had never seen before. "Don't you dare put this on us." This wasn't for us. This was for you, for your ego. So you could stop being Dave the struggling salesman and become David Miller, the TV star. You gambled with your children's future, with our whole lives, so you could feel like a big man for 5 minutes. A sharp knock on the door made us all jump. A young, nervous-looking production assistant opened it a crack. "Mr. and Mrs. Miller? The network's lawyers are here. They need to speak with you." The next hour was a blur of legalese and grim-faced men in expensive suits. They weren't unkind, but they were firm. We were presented with a settlement agreement. We would sign over the deed to the house, the titles to the cars, my Mustang, Mom's SUV, and agree to a payment plan for the remaining balance of the winnings, which, after liquidating our assets, they estimated would be around $40,000. In exchange, Fremantle would not pursue criminal charges for fraud. It was, one of the lawyers explained coolly, a generous offer. My father, a broken man, signed everything without even reading it, his hand trembling so badly his signature was barely legible. My mother signed with a cold, detached precision. When we finally left the studio, the California sun felt harsh and alien. We were ushered into a black town car, not the celebratory limo we'd arrived in. The ride to the hotel was silent. The air was thick with unspoken accusations and the stench of our family's ruin. When we got to our adjoining rooms, my mom, Chloe, and I went into one, and my dad went into the other. My mom closed the connecting door between the rooms and, for the first time, locked it. That small click echoed louder than anything Steve Harvey had said on stage. We spent the rest of the day in a daze. Mom was on the phone, her voice strained, talking to our bank, our mortgage company, trying to understand the scope of the disaster. Chloe sat on the edge of her bed, laptop open, furiously researching bankruptcy laws and fraud statutes, her face a mask of concentration. I just lay on my bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the moment over and over in my head. The lights, the applause, the smiling host, the sudden sharp turn into a nightmare. My phone buzzed incessantly with texts from friends back home who had seen the show. "Dude, what happened? Is it true? OMG, Leo, I'm so sorry." I ignored them all. Later that evening, there was a quiet knock on our locked door. It was my dad. "Sarah? Can I come in?" he asked, his voice muffled. "No," my mother said flatly, not even looking up from the phone. "Please," he begged. I need to talk to you all." Chloe looked at Mom, who gave a slight, weary nod. Chloe got up and unlocked the door. My dad stood there, looking 10 years older than he had that morning. His eyes were red-rimmed and pleading. "I know I messed up," he began. "I know I destroyed everything. But there's something else. Another reason I did it." He took a deep breath, steeling himself. "The money wasn't just for a house or a car. I was being blackmailed." The word blackmail hung in the sterile hotel room, sucking out whatever little oxygen was left. My mom lowered her phone, her expression a mixture of exhaustion and wary disbelief. Chloe, ever the pragmatist, crossed her arms. "Blackmailed?" she repeated, her tone dripping with skepticism. "By who? About what? The embezzlement?" My dad shook his head, looking more pathetic than I'd ever seen him. "No, worse." He stepped into the room, letting the door click shut behind him, creating our own little island of misery. "It was a woman, my supervisor from the mailroom, the one who caught me." He finally looked at my mom, his eyes pleading for an impossible forgiveness. "Her name is Janice. After they fired me, we had an affair." My mother's face, which I thought couldn't get any paler, turned the color of ash. She didn't scream or cry. She just stared at him, her expression utterly blank, as if her mind was refusing to process the information. An affair. The word was so common, so cliché, but hearing it in relation to my parents felt like a physical violation, a desecration of my entire childhood. It only lasted a few months, Dad continued, his words rushing out in a desperate torrent. It was the biggest mistake of my life, Sarah, besides all the others. I broke it off. I never saw her again, until last year, after the first episode of Feud aired. She called me, said she saw us on TV, saw we'd won big. She said if I didn't pay her, she'd go to the network and expose everything. Not just the embezzlement, but us. How much? Chloe's voice was dangerously calm. $50,000, Dad whispered. She said she needed it for her son's college. She said I owed her. I paid her from the winnings. I thought that would be the end of it. But it wasn't, was it? Mom said, her voice hollow. He shook his head. A month ago, when the Tournament of Champions was announced, she called again. She wanted another 50. I told her I didn't have it, that the money was tied up in the house, the cars. She didn't care. She said if I didn't get her the money, she wouldn't just go to the network, she'd go to the press. She'd destroy us publicly. That's why I was so desperate to win again. I thought it was the only way to save us from this. He finished, and the ugly, sordid truth lay exposed on the hotel room carpet. He hadn't just been a thief and a liar, he'd been an adulterer. His grand gamble wasn't a misguided attempt to give his family a better life. It was a frantic effort to hide his own sordid secrets. The foundation of our family wasn't just built on a lie, it was rotten to the core. That night was the longest of my life. The next morning, my mom made a decision. She sat us all down, including my dad, who looked like he hadn't slept at all. We have two options, she said, her voice clear and strong for the first time in 24 hours. We can run from this, change our names, and spend the rest of our lives hiding in shame. Or we can own it, we can face it, and we can start over, honestly. She looked directly at my father. David, you are going to call the network's lawyer. You are going to tell him everything about Janice. Blackmail is a crime. And so he did. With my mother and Chloe on either side of him, he made the call. It turned out that Janice, in her greed, had made a critical mistake. She'd contacted the network herself, trying to get a payout from them as well, which is what had triggered their investigation and the court order in the first place. My dad's confession, corroborated by her own attempts to extort the network, built an ironclad case against her. The weeks that followed were a brutal public reckoning. The story was everywhere. We lost the house, the cars, every tangible piece of our family feud life. We moved into a small apartment, the kind of place we'd lived in before the show, only this time it felt less like a stepping stone and more like a penance. My parents' marriage hung by a thread. There were days of stony silence and nights where I could hear my mother's quiet sobs through the thin walls. My dad got a job driving for a delivery service, the shame of his fall from grace etched on his face every morning. But slowly, something began to shift. The public humiliation, as awful as it was also liberating. There were no more secrets. We had hit rock bottom, and there was nowhere to go but up. Chloe, who had been the angriest, was the first to start building a bridge. She helped Dad find a lawyer, not to fight the network, but to navigate the legal mess with Janice. My mom started seeing a therapist, and I got a part-time job at a grocery store, bagging groceries. My Mustang was gone, replaced by a bus pass, but I felt lighter. One evening, about 6 months later, we were all sitting in our cramped living room. A rerun of Family Feud came on the television. For a moment, we all tensed. On the screen, a new family was celebrating a win, jumping up and down, hugging each other. It was a mirror image of what we once were. My dad reached over and picked up the remote, but my mom put her hand on his to stop him. "It's okay, David," she said softly. "Leave it." We watched for a moment in silence. We weren't that smiling family on the screen anymore. We were something different. We were broken, but we were real. We had lost all the money, the house, the fame. But in the wreckage of my father's lies, we had found something we hadn't had even at the height of our winnings: the truth. It wasn't a grand prize, and there was no applause. But as I looked at my family, huddled together in that small apartment, I realized it was something we could actually build a life on. It was a quiet, difficult, and honest new beginning. And it was enough.